Here's where we talk about threat models, because I think that people are going to have different threat models. Some people really don't want their information leaked for whatever reasons. Maybe they're a human rights worker. Maybe they are a lawyer representing a dissident. Maybe they are a protester, activist in a hostile country. You have to be really careful with your privacy in those places. The average person maybe just doesn't want the government collecting their information because it's none of their business, or they don't want corporations monetizing their data because it's just really not their right to do so. And so when we think about surveillance, we need to think about, like, what are we trying to optimize for? Because there are absolutely trade-offs a lot of the time. And when it comes to Apple, I would say that Apple is a really great company for most people, because they're not an advertising company the same way that Google is an advertising company. They treat your data a lot better than Google does. But if you're someone like me, and I'm kind of a privacy extremist, Apple takes too much information for my liking. So, I do use some Apple products, and when I do, I take great pains to lock them down even further. Like Michael Bazzell has a great book where he talks about setting up a Mac from start and all the settings that you should adjust, just like blocking out a lot of telemetry that that Apple is collecting themselves. So I think if I were to set my grandmother up with something and I want her to be more private and more secure, I would not put her on Android. I would put her on iOS. I would not put her on Windows. I would put her on a Mac. But if someone comes to me and says, Naomi, I'm writing this article. I'm an investigative journalist, and I want it to be as private as possible. I don't want this information leaking. I would choose other options. I would choose a Graphene OS device for them. And honestly, I would choose Graphene OS for everyone. It's not hard to set up. It's a wonderful operating system. They do a fantastic job. It kind of operates just like Android, except you don't have the Google in it. So you're not sending everything you do to Google centralized servers. I feel amazing on my Graphene phone. I'm got it right here, actually. So I've got my little a little Graphene device, and it's wonderful. I adore it. So it really just depends where you come down. A lot of people don't want the inconvenience of having to install, flash a new operating system on their phone.
Yeah.
So Apple might be a better option for them. Someone might not want to learn any sort of command line or deal with Linux or driver issues or anything, so Apple might be a good idea. If you are more worried about privacy, there are better options than going with Apple, for sure.
Okay, so messaging Signal would be the best choice. Otherwise, like someone like, let's just say, a grandmother or someone who's technically challenged, then maybe Apple is an okay choice. But for the people who are really privacy conscious, Signal, and then look at Graphene on a phone. So that's your recommended phone, because I wanted to ask you that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, Graphene is amazing. So the reason I like Graphene, first of all, it has to be on a Pixel device, and people think it's ironic because Pixel is
very
Google.
ironic.
Yeah, and but the reason why the Graphene team chose Pixel as the only device that Graphene is supported on is because you can flash alternative operating systems on all kinds of Android devices, right? But you lose all of the security protections when you do that. So you can have like verified boot, all of these things when you're using Android, but as soon as you flash an alternative OS, you lose those things. Pixel is the only device that meets their security requirements, because you can have verified boot even with flashing an alternative operating system. On top of that, Pixel devices are great. They have this Titan M2 chip in it, which stops brute forcing attacks. So if someone gets access to your device, basically there's this delay mechanism in there, so that if someone's trying to guess your PIN, after a while it just gets so long, the periods in between, that people just can't brute force it. There are different profiles on there that you could set to just shut down when you exit them. So maybe you have like 2FA or something on a secondary profile. When you open up your phone for the first time, so if I just booted my phone and I type in my PIN, even if I then lock my phone afterwards because it's been booted and because I previously have typed in my PIN, that PIN is potentially accessible in RAM by someone who's a sophisticated adversary, right? So if someone steals my phone and I've already booted up for the first time and logged in, they could potentially get everything on my device. However, these secondary profiles, and when I say secondary, I mean you can have up to 40 different profiles on your Graphene phone if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. Like maybe 4 might be the max. But what happens is every time I exit out of one of those secondary profiles, it's treated as a hard reboot, which
Interesting.
means that if I'm carrying around my phone and using it all throughout the day and messaging people and taking pictures, writing notes and whatever, it doesn't matter if someone gets my phone. They can't access anything in those secondary profiles. There's no password stored in that RAM. It's that like this hard reset every time I exit out of it. So the security precaution of that is great. I really don't have to fear losing my device, leaving it in a taxi, and someone, getting access to what's on there. If I have a backup at home, then having that running around in the wild doesn't bother me. So it's and they have a lot of things like granular controls. They have things called contact scopes. I mean, how many apps have you downloaded that have said, "Can I get access to your contacts?"
Yeah.
And we don't give it a second thought. But if we were to give it a second thought, we'd realize that this private information isn't ours to give away. We've just granted some unknown developer access to like 1,000 of our friends and family members, their birth dates, their home addresses, their phone numbers, notes in there, where they work. That sort of information obviously is monetized. It's sold. It's sold to these people search websites. It's sold to countless other, data brokers and other services. So we really should think about that. But there are some apps that when you go to download it, it demands, you cannot download us unless you give us access to your contacts. What Contact Scopes does on Graphene is it basically creates this fake contacts profile. That's empty. Or you can literally say, well, I only want it to get access to David Bubble's, contact information. That's the only contact I want it to do. So it will allow you to create these scopes where you can like granularly decide what information they're getting. Maybe you don't want them to get phone numbers, but you want to allow them email addresses. You can basically have more control over what these apps get. And I think that's what privacy is all about. It's not about hiding or secrecy, all of that. It's just about choice. It's just about reclaiming our right to get to decide who gets our information and then really exercising that choice, I think, is really important.
The two big ones that I wrote down here, because I'm sure people will ask, what about banking apps and what about notifications? Do they work?
So there some apps can be problematic, and that is because there are certain apps that require you to have like a verified Google device. And if it sees that it's been tampered with having a new operating system, it will say this is not secure enough for our app. And I presume that's a liability issue on their end. Perhaps the bank doesn't want to be liable if you're putting this on an insecure device. I haven't had an issue with any apps on my device, but I have heard there are some banking apps that will not work. And for that, I have a secondary device that I use them, because when it comes down to it, I actually don't need to carry around a banking app with me everywhere I go. I don't think most people do.
And it can get stolen. Yeah.
It's handy to have to use if we need it. But we generally don't need it when we're going to the grocery store.
Yep.
We don't need to make a wire transfer while we're in line at the checkout or try on clothes or visiting our grandparents. And so I think we can start to be more judicious about, like, if we need an app for something, do we need it on the device that's very personal and goes with us everywhere we go and sees everything that we see and knows who we're connected with? Usually not. I think that the device we carry around with us can probably have far fewer apps. I have hardly any apps on my phone at all. It really is just a communication tool for emergencies. I don't have any social media on there. I just don't need those companies to know what I'm doing. Yeah. That being said, if you're using Graphene and you wanted to have all of those apps, it's going to be far more private than using Android or Apple, because they do this amazing sandboxing with the apps where they're just the apps just aren't getting access to as much information, and you can again granularly control how much information they get access to. Perhaps I shut off all network permissions entirely from my calculator app well, that seems reasonable. My calculator doesn't need the internet.
Exactly.
But I could just turn that on when I want to re-grant access. And so it's just a great system for being able to choose at an app level what I want them to have access to.
Do you get notifications?
Yeah. Something that Android has is Google Play Services. And to understand what Google Play Services is, it's this infrastructure that is there for a number of reasons. And there's some bad byproducts of it. So we'll talk about what it's meant for to start off with. It's meant to basically save you on battery by creating this centralized infrastructure that more efficiently handles things like notifications. So instead of like doing all these different requests to all of these different servers, it provides this more efficient mechanism within Google Play Services. And then the apps just talk to Google Play Services. And what that means is that instead of apps handling these things on their own, Google Play Services is handling that. Now, I don't have Google Play Services on my my main profile. I don't want it. I don't want it talking to all of my apps. One of the byproducts of this system is that Google's just getting a ton of data about everything you do on an Android phone because it's all going through this centralized mechanism, and that data is just being sent off to Google servers. So like Signal, for example, they handle their own notifications, push notifications, unless it notices that you have Google Play Services there on the device, in which case it will then default to that. So I don't have Google Play Services where my Signal profile is, so Signal handles it by itself, and it's fine. I actually don't really like notifications in the first place, so I have those turned on because I don't need a distraction machine, following me around. If I want to call someone, I will call it. If I want to check my phone, I'll check it. And do you know the statistics? Like, apparently, people on average will unlock their phone every 10 minutes, like over 100 times a day, right? So knowing that it's just going to be 10 minutes before I see a missed call or a message, actually, that's fine for me to do it on my own terms. I don't need it to interrupt me mid-sentence or whatever. Now, that being said, with Google Play Services, I do have it installed on one of my profiles because there are certain apps that require it. But what Graphene does is they use something called sandboxed Google Play Services. Usually, Google Play Services has incredible access. They're just like tentacles seeping into your Android device and getting access to everything. What Graphene does is says, we're going to treat you like any other app. We're going to sandbox you. So you have this little area where you're allowed to operate and you're not actually allowed to put your tentacles anywhere else. And that's great because I can put Google Play Services on this other profile and these apps can use it. And Google isn't getting any extra information from that. So I found that Uber works better with Google Play Services. So if you're someone who uses ride-sharing apps, you can install Google Play Services fine, and you can have your apps work completely fine with that. Same with some VoIP providers. If you want notifications to come through and the VoIP provider doesn't have their own internal mechanism for this, you can use Google Play Services, just install it on another profile, and then you're going to get those real-time notifications.
Because phones are the big problem, I think, for a lot of people, right? So number one, top of the tier is top device is Graphene, then iOS, then Android, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Android is just collecting. It's insane how much information they're collecting. But Apple and Google, they both will bypass your VPN for their own internal system. So if you're someone who has a VPN always on, you have that kill switch and you're like, well, I'm protecting my IP address and staying private. Actually, Apple and Google will both just decide to bypass it for their own internal functioning. And they will say, well, these are essential things, so we can't have it go through a VPN because they're essential and for main operating and all this. And really, that does decrease your privacy a huge amount. And when you have your internet gateway and your VPN on the same device, the OS can literally just decide to bypass one to get to the internet. And so I really love Graphene in that it's not bypassing my VPN. I think that's a good thing to have on a phone.
That's really interesting. So are you saying that Android and iOS bypass your VPN with a kill switch and everything for their stuff, so they just simply bypass it all?
Yep. So there's a research team called MISC, and they've been doing some great research into this. And they just analyze the packets that are being sent across the internet on their devices. And they have a long list of the different activities that Apple will bypass your VPN for. And a lot of them are not even things that you'd think are essential. Like it's things to do with the App Store or things to do with, your podcast app or,
Yeah.
it's crazy to me that a company that is billing itself as a privacy company is doing this. I felt kind of betrayed and heartbroken when I discovered that this was going on. Google is doing the same thing, but I didn't expect any more of Google. I mean, one thing I will say of Apple is that even though they could do better with privacy, I think it's egregious that they're collecting so much data about users. I really do like that they are pushing the privacy conversation. A lot of people wouldn't even see privacy as a valuable thing were it
Yeah.
not for these amazing marketing campaigns from Apple telling people, hey, surveillance is going on. Our tools will help keep you private. So I do think that they're helping and they're net positive. Just for my personal life, I've just decided to minimize Apple and opt for things like Graphene instead.